Hi there YouTube, it's Clormo with another tutorial and continuing this season 2 of tutorials for Logic Pro X, and today I'm going to be talking about the EVOC 20 synth, and this one is a little bit in the mid-range of complex, and as I would call it, and in essence what the EVOC 20 is a vocoder. So we're going to see a few things about it. It's quite a few differences from the other synths that we have covered so far. So this may be a longer video than usual. Anyways, I just want a reminder as usual that this video is part of the current round of the Amazon gift card, and all you need to do is subscribe and comment on this video or any of the previous videos of this round to participate and have a chance at winning that one. So the winner will be announced on next week's video. And with that, let's just go right into Logic. And first, I want to make a few I'm going to talk a little bit about the EVOC 20 and a few things that relate to it and are important to know before we start seeing what it does. So this synth combines a vocoder with a PolySynth, and it can be played in real time. All that means is that if you don't know what a vocoder is, please search a little bit more info on that, because I'm not gonna go into all the mechanics of what a vocoder does. But in essence, what it does is just takes an audio signal from historically it has been used for voices, but you can use anything. You can use drums, any instrument, any audio signal, process it, and be able to play it through your MIDI keyboard. The word vocoder, though, comes from the term voice encoder, and again, like I just said, it analyzes and transfers an audio signal that is sent as an input through the synth, and then creates an encoded voice sound. Well, you can play those in real time, which is one of the main reasons why the EVOC 20 is called a PolySynth, because it has its own, it can create its own synthesizer signal, and you can play that, or you can use that audio signal to further create different sounds with that as a base. Then you can, like I said, create your classic vocoder sounds. One classic example is that Darth Vader voice sound. That was created using a voice encoder, so you can create that with an EVOC 20 if you so choose to do it, right? But we're not gonna do that here. We're gonna play it simple, because again, this is an introductory video. Your sidechain, as you can see in the interface right now, is where you're gonna select your audio source, your signal, to process through the synth. And I'm gonna be obviously doing the overview of the interface as I usually do in a minute here, and you will see how that works. But just as an overall, it's as easy as just going to your sidechain, selecting that audio, and then again you can play it with your MIDI keyboard, and you're gonna see that right away. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up the synth, right? So if you notice right away, I have all the other synths that I have had before, and then let me move this a little bit down. This here was the last tutorial, the ESE, right? And I have some MIDI information here. Now I created the track to put the EVOC 20, and just as a refresher, remember that you go to your instrument drop down and select it from there, and it will pop up, and this is the interface of it. Since this synth is much different than the previous ones that we have covered, I'm not going to be dealing with the usual MIDI information that I have done for the previous ones. And then I have another track with some audio file, and to set up this, you first select the synth, like I said, then you need a track with your source. Right now I have this amazing spoken word, and this is just came from the Apple loop, so there's nothing complicated with that, you just go to your Apple Loops library and go to, you can search it if you want from the search box. If you want to follow me, amazing spoken word, and then I put that in a different track, right? And the reason for that is that to complete your setup of the synth, like I said, you have to do it through the sidechain. So when you have your source in this track, you go to sidechain, and it's gonna be in, by default it's gonna be in none. So I will go to the sidechain and see that it's right there selectable. And now my PolySynth, my EVOC 20 is completely set up to start using that audio signal to create different sounds with my MIDI keyboard. One last thing that will come in handy, not only for you to understand what I'm doing with this tutorial, but depending on what you create later, is that you may want to either mute that, or just, if you don't want, if you're afraid that that might create a glitch, which sometimes it might do, and this is, I'm just telling you from experience, instead of doing that, go to the first track, selected your signal track, and right now it's a stereo output, right? So that means that if I play
Amazing.
it has sound, but if I just want to make sure that that doesn't interfere with what I'm gonna be doing with the synth, select the track, go to stereo out here, your output, and put it to no output. And now only your setup with your EVOC 20 ready to go. Now that that's ready, and we're gonna go right into the interface as I have done with the previous videos. Overall on the interface, let's start from here. We have our sidechain analysis parameters. So what this is going to do is analyzes that signal, and you can process it with your an attack and release and a freeze. Then here we have our synthesis parameters. So this is independent of having an audio signal or having a none, right? In sidechain, you can create sounds with this synthesis parameters that we have here. And we have a lot of things that we have seen before, right? We have our typical transposing buttons. Right now, this is in FM mode, so this is why I talked to you about the EFM one first, because this synth also crosses between an FM synthesizer and a normal synthesis, subtractive synthesis one, right? So, and that you can change it FM and dual mode. FM would be your FM synthesis, and dual would be your normal subtractive synthesis. Moving on, we have here our modulation parameters. So that's giving in the form of two LFOs. Then here on top, this would be the equivalent of our filter parameters that we have in the other sense. And in this case, in the case of the EVOC 20, they're called format filter parameters. And the formats are nothing more than the peaks of the sounds that are done when you speak, the vowel sounds, our A, E, O, U. Those sounds are, those peaks that those sounds create are the formants. Any other combination sounds or transitional sounds, as I call them for myself, like T's, P's, and all these other sounds that in combination with vowels create words, would be more like noise parameters. Those are like white noise that when combined together create words and create spoken language, right? So these are our format parameters. So we have a kind of a band filter here, and then these are the bands that are represented right now here graphically. So we have 10 bands, and then we have a resonance control, and we can stretch and shift those formants. I'm going to show you that how that works. Then to the far right, we have our UV detection parameters, and those detect the unvoiced portions of the sound in our signal. So um, playing with those or adjusting those will ensure that it improves the speech intelligibility. So how good that signal that I'm processing through the sidechain is intelligible. Like it says amazing. So if I want the synth to process that signal to resemble more the original sound, then I need to tweak these to make sure that I take care of the unvoiced um, signals, which are those P's and T's, those click sounds. And then to the far right, we have our output parameters. You should be very familiar with this by now. We just have a level, right, knob, and then we have a chorus given by as an ensemble. So we can put it off. I'm gonna leave it off for what I'm gonna be doing, and then show what it does with 1 and 2. We also have here our signal. So the signal button, it's by default set as the synthesizer, so it will be controlled by these parameters here. You can use the analysis signal, which is gonna be just the signal that I have here as it is, or the vocoder signal, which is what we want, because we want to play our signal through MIDI and then further tweak it using the parameters that we have in the synth itself, right? So now I'm gonna do something slightly different to show you the different to give you an overview of the different sections of the interface. Instead of talking about them without playing the result, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the different controls while giving you a preview, because we're gonna be dealing with an audio signal. It's gonna be very difficult or a little bit less intuitive if you don't see what each does, because you're not playing with just a single note, you're playing with an audio signal processed through a synth. So like I just did before, I will just make sure that your signal is in the vocoded state, and we have our no output, and I just have a long note, a 1-bar note here at the C4. So the reason is because I just want this to be I didn't want to put any chords, but you can actually do all of this I'm going to be explaining with chords, and it's going to be processed as such. I just wanted to keep it at the note level, so you can see what that does and then go from there if you want. Let's just give it a play with what we have so far and processing that vocoding that amazing signal audio. So you can kind of get that it's saying amazing, but the way it's been processed through these different controls obviously give it a different flavor, a different result in the audio, and this is one of the main reasons why you would want to use the EVOC 20, and probably that what you just heard right now, it's good enough for creativity and creating some stuff in your music. But let's see what the different controls do in an overview format, because that's why you're here, right? That's why you're looking at this video. So we have again your analysis parameters for that signal. You have an attack and release, and then we have this freeze button, right? Let's see what those do. If you don't, just as a refresher, if you are looking for this at this tutorial for the first time and you haven't seen the other videos in my series, your attack is how quick this when you press a MIDI key, how fast you're gonna go to the top level of that audio in this case, and then the release is how long it will take for it to go. So let's start playing with those. So obviously with a higher attack, it doesn't fully get to the, and this is giving in milliseconds. So let's make the release less. So with less release, you kind of get it more of the amazing, but it has some noise on it. And then with the release over there, right, once it gets to the top, which is the A, right, that format, because it's a vowel, A, it kind of won't die. So and the freeze, so the freeze, what it does is just that it's gonna freeze the, like it's saying amazing, right? It gets to the I at this level, at the zing, or whenever that playhead is passing through, whatever I freeze, it is gonna freeze, because that is useful in the sense that when we speak and when we sing, right, we can't hold notes forever naturally, because we're either gonna run out of air or our voice is just gonna fall. This freeze button lets you do those type of effects, and everything that I'm gonna be talking about here obviously is automatable, so that's great because we can automate that freeze and create some stuff there. And then lastly, we have our bands field. Like I said, the bands you can you're gonna affect here what you see in the filter bank. So right now the bands it's set at 10, and you have 10 bands there. If you can go all the way up to 20, which is where the EVOC 20 gets its name from. It can go up to 20 bands. Obviously, this is gonna help us with the processing that audio signal to resemble more what it was originally, or make it more clear, more understandable. So I just changed it to 20. Let's see what the result was. Let's make it all the way through. This has a lot of noise and almost broke the clipping level. Sorry if that gives you problems in your ears later. So we're gonna keep it at 20 to keep going on, and we're gonna be talking now. Next, we're gonna go with the synth parameters here down. So our synthesis parameters, which is this area here, we have our global parameters, which depending on if you're using chords or just notes, you can use these buttons here, right? The which determine, right, the keyboard mode and the number of voices that you are gonna be using with the synth. And for this case, I'm gonna turn on the unison because it doesn't really matter. I'm not using a chords. I'm just using a single note. I could actually just go to mono if I wanted. It should be the same thing. If I have different shorter notes and chords, then having more voices would be advisable, and then using the legato button also, because that way you can also go into the glide feature, right? Because it's going to give me that glide effect as I go from one note to the other. But since we're dealing with just one note, I'm just going to keep it with that unison there. Then down here we have our oscillator parameters, and this is just determines the different waveforms that the synthesis can use. Two important things like that I kind of mentioned earlier. There's two modes, right? You can switch between FM mode and the dual mode. The dual mode resemble more as one of the synths that we have seen before, a subtractive synth. The FM mode will be an FM synth, and initially, or the default is FM because it opens other possibilities when you're processing an audio signal. So we'll see what those do, but I would if you want to learn this more later, right, on your own, before I do any other more more in-depth tutorial, then start with dealing with FM mode, and then dual will just give you two waveforms. The FM mode, what you have is the oscillator one will create a sine wave. Pitch of that oscillator is going to be controlled by your oscillator number 2. So the different tones and harmonics that become audible, right? And then I don't know if you're noticing, but every time I switch, you have this subtle changes for your controls here, because, or your parameters, because FM, remember from the EFM1 you were dealing with ratios. Here we can just detune and balance my two waveforms. Then going here to the right, I have this noise button. What the noise button does is just gonna introduce a level of noise to my audio file, and then down here I can give it a different color, which is white or blue noise. So your white noise is traditionally used to create wind and rain sounds, and it maintains the same energy at each frequency. Your blue noise sounds brighter, and it has some bass suppressed by high filter if you want to process that. So let's just play around with these parameters for now. Generate some noise. You can notice less noise, white noise. Notice the difference between white and blue. I'm just gonna play with the coarse ratio, the fine ratio. I don't want to keep it 1:1. This is a little bit more precise to the original signal, a little bit less precise. Let's go to dual mode. You can transpose that. Here we'll have the wave 1, only wave 2, balance it out. You can further detune that. Imagine automating that, right, to kind of enter to some other part of your music, right? So moving on, we have our normal kind of filter parameters that we've seen before, focus and resonance. So that's nothing. I guess it's not going to be that. We also have attack ease. That's going to be controlling how your note is being played, opposed to this attack and release, which changes how the signal is being analyzed. Here we're talking about pressing keys in the keyboard. So notice that if I set the cutoff to 0, there's nothing, right? Because I'm just cutting all that frequency, so I need it at full level. And and you pretty much need it to the high levels possible. If I had some chords here and shorter notes, then my cutoff would not, just eliminate all the sound at halfway. It would create a different effect. But in one note, like I have here with 1 bar length, I kind of needed the full length. And adjusting the resonance will give me obviously a peak, a boost, so I will achieve a brighter sound as I go up. I'm gonna leave it there. Let's play with this attack and release. Less attack, so it gets to the peak faster. Kind of resembles a little bit more to that amazing. You can understand more. It's a little bit more like a blended effect, right? If I put more attack. And like I said, the bend range really won't do anything here because I just have one note. So, but if you had more, like I said, shorter notes and all that stuff, then you would get a different. You can expand that bend effect and give a little bit more range. So this down here are tuning and pitch parameters, so you can tune this in sense, fine tune it more. And then the analog knob, what it does is just gonna set an amount of random pitch detuning. So notice that as it is going through the word of that signal, and then this glide here is just gonna determine the time it takes for the pitch to slide from one note to another. And like I said, it's not gonna do anything because it's just one note. So that plays with that bend range also, so that modulation range. Now we go to the right, and we have here our formant filter. All I'm gonna say here to keep this as a more of an overview video is that the upper half of my formant filter applies to the analysis section, and the lower half applies to the synthesis section. So this here applies to this here applies to this. That's as easy as I can put it. From here, like I said, we have our low frequency parameters, and then we can adjust those with the slider, right? So the low frequency parameters are in this area, the high frequency parameters are in this area. So these are the bands, like I've said before, and then we have this lowest and highest buttons. What those do is that when you click them, it will determine whether the lowest and highest filter bands will act as a band pass filter, or if they will act as a low pass or high pass filter. So when you press them, you see that it changes the shape of that curve, which is represented, or you can graphically also make the analogy of an EQ, right, of your band pass. I'm just gonna leave them as a low and high pass filter. I'm gonna keep my bands at 20, and let's see what we can do here. So we have that amazing filter with our synth parameters. Kind of sounds bright, so I'm gonna keep it that way. So I'm gonna take off a little bit from the lower end of my frequency. I'm gonna take a little bit. That kind of sounds better there. I'm gonna leave it at that. Now my form and stretch mode that I have here, this is what it does. It will change the width of all the bands in the synthesis filter bank, so it will affect what I have down here. And let's see how that, if I stretch it and make it wider, or I can make it, so that kind of creates sort of a filter, I mean like a pitch kind of effect. But you can, the analogy that you can see is that affect the slope of that transition from my signal, right, filter to the synth. The synthesis filter bank, the form and shift just shifts your bands as they're being played, as the audio is being played from the low end to the high end. And then my resonance is gonna introduce the same as we have done it with the synth counterpart, right? It's gonna introduce a peak. You can, right away, you've been noticed, if you have been following, you have noticed that we have a processed signal that sounds much different from the beginning, but gives you a lot of possibilities to go forward. So now moving down to our modulation parameters, I'm not going to spend too much time here. You have two LFOs. You have a pitch LFO, which is controlled by a wheel, and then you have a shift LFO, which has an intensity. So your shift LFO is going to control your form and shift, and then the pitch LFO is going to control the pitch modulation of the oscillators, which will produce a vibrato effect. So that doesn't really, it's not that complicated to understand, I would hope. And then you have also a rate knob for your shift LFO, and you have a different set of waveforms that you can choose. So let's just play with that. You can make this pitch LFO a spread. I don't have any mod wheel information in this note, so this is not gonna really do much, you know, the spread, unless I make it full. Let's try that again. So you see that you can automate that and do some other stuff. Right now this is at 32 bars, but I really have a one note, this one bar. And the different waveforms that you use are going to give you a different result. Now let's get a little bit with the shift telephone. The different waves on the right side are going to give you a different effect. That kind of gives you an idea, so let's move on. Here we have to the right, like I said before, the UV detection parameters. Not really much that I want to say here on other than the sensitivity knob will determine how sensitive the UV detection is, and there's different modes that we have for that UV detection. We can use the noise alone for the unvoiced portions of the sound. Again, those click sounds that we made when we speak, T's, S's, that sort of thing. Noise plus the synth will use the noise and the synthesizer for those unvoiced portions. And then the blend mode will use a combination of both. So let's see what all of these do. Let's play that. Just with noise. no, blend. And then the level knob is just gonna set the volume of that signal. If you use a very high sensitivity, have take care with this level knob, because you can overload the synth unless you have a system that's awesome. And you notice how I have been clipping here just by being not being careful with that. So it's almost, you can't really understand. I'm sorry about that. I clipped again when I changed the mode. So yeah, that's what the UV detection parameters do for you. And then to the far right, we have our output parameters. Nothing more than I can say here. I already talked about the signal. Your level is just your the level of the whole instrument, as it has always been. Make it louder. Again, I clipped. I'm sorry. And there's also a stereo width control that I have here. And then I'm gonna change these parameters a little bit. So the combination of all of those parameters are going to process that signal that you put in your sidechain, but you can also choose not to and use your synthesis parameters to create other sounds. And last but not least, as usual, you have presets that you can use. I just wanted to show you this one, the Galactic Warrior. That is supposed to be a kind of a building block for creating a Darth Vader type of sound, but there's a lot of presets here that you can also play with and get more proficient with the EVOC 20 PolySynth, which is good for creating effects using audio signals that not only are limited to vocals, but you can also use any other type of sound, because with your synthesis parameters you can process any signal basically and get creative. This is more to get creative, add a little bit of spice to your beats or any other music that you are making right now. So with that, I'm gonna leave the tutorial for here, because I think I stretched it a little bit more than usual, but I also wanted to keep it at the overview level, not in the sound. When I say overview, if you're seeing one of my tutorials for the first time, what I mean is that I go over the interface, tell you what each knob does, because that way you can go on your own, do your stuff. But when I start doing get to the videos in sound design, then I'm gonna take a little bit longer, because if I want to do something specific, then I will need to explain much more than what I just did here, even though if this video seems a little bit longer than usual for a typical overview video. But that's it for now. Next video I'm going to be talking about the I said sculpture, so with that I'm going to be talking about sculpture. So we're going to get into a little bit of the sound design part of dealing with Logic Pro and making music, and then Alchemy will be the last one. That probably, if I think that through a little bit more, since that may take, even if it's an overview video, might take a little bit longer. I might just leave it for next year. So we'll see. Maybe sculpture will be the last one for this season, and then open the next season with the Alchemy and go from there. So Thanks everybody for supporting. Thanks for those who have been reaching out to me and sending emails, asking all the questions and all that stuff. I appreciate it. Hope that my responses have been helpful. If you have asked for support, like following you on social media or subscribing to your channel, all that stuff, I have done so. If I haven't, call me out on it, send me a note, leave me a comment. Do what you need to do. If you are seeing this for the first time, make sure that you follow me on social media. You can see the different ways to find me below in the graphic. And hey, looking forward to meeting some of you and making more music. Keep making music yourself.